Thank you for coming through. I am live to you Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, a solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You can check out my website at damonbrown.net if you want to learn more about the work that I do, if you think we'd be able to work together well. And you're watching Bring Your Worth TV. Again, I come to you every Wednesday, most Wednesdays, at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. I'm here to support you. Come through your feedback, your questions, your comments, things that you might be stuck with and you're having a challenge with. You can subscribe for free at the different platforms that you might be watching it on. So if you're watching me on Twitch, you can go to twitch.tv. I think it's slash Brown Damon. You can subscribe or follow me on there. You can also watch some of the older episodes over on Spotify at the link below, as well as the main, I guess, mother station, main hub, whatever you want to call it, over at bringyourworth.tv. All of them are currently free. Go and check it out. Get the old episodes. This is episode 408, so there's plenty of gems, hopefully, for you to excavate through that. And I'm also author of several books, including the complete Bring Your Worth collection. It's 7 in total of my books, some of them bestsellers that you guys made bestsellers. Thank you, including The Bite Size Entrepreneur, the first bestseller, as well as Bring Your Worth, which of course is the name of my publishing company and this show. And my personal favorite, Built From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. They are unabridged and all in this book. There's a lot going on in here. Thank you all that have supported, including some new readers that just grabbed it this week. Happy to send you signed copies over at damebrown.net. If you just want to listen to it, you can actually go to your favorite podcast platform. You can go to your favorite audiobook platform. I'm independent, so it's available on all of them. No restrictions on me, which I so appreciate. Trying to give you guys some of that freedom too. If you want to go ahead and listen right now, though, after our conversation right now, you can listen to all 8 hours of the audiobook for free right here at bringyourworth.tv. What's the name of the website? Bringyourworth.tv. Man, it is Wednesday. I've already had an action-packed week. I don't know about y'all, but today feels like Friday afternoon. I'm ready to go ahead and take a bath right now, to be frank. But I also love connecting with y'all, and so we're gonna get some energy up, have some fun today, and talk about our fun subject. Again, you can catch me on Twitch. You can also catch me on on Spotify. And I will not be speaking there, but they are my people. The IIJ Freelance Conference is happening in a matter of days. Y'all, as if you're catching me live, February is going to be in like 72 hours. Isn't that crazy? I've been busy as heck this January. I feel like it's still 2024 over here. I don't know about y'all. You can jump in the comments, let me know how y'all are feeling. For me, I'm all like, I'm still trying to catch up from last year, which is a blessing. I'm working with a lot of y'all, a lot of coaching, a lot of ghostwriting behind the scenes. So, we've been busy over here. I appreciate y'all that are supporting my work, and I in turn and able and enabled the words of my mouth to support y'all. But with it's already going to be February. This conference is amazing. I actually spoke at the conference. I think I spoke at the conference a few years ago when it started, and then I did some behind the scenes and also some hosting when they did the conference a year ago. It's led by Catherine X. Lewis. Fantastic. I love your work. We go way back when I was on the board of directors of the American Society of Journalists and Authors. She made it her mission a few years ago to go independent as far as creating this conference to support as the Institute of Independent Journalists, IIJ. It's really affordable. It's an amazing conference. I'm not involved with conferences that there's certain conferences that I'm not even involved with anymore. So if I'm rocking with them, consider it the Bring Your Worth seal of approval. They reached out to me. They let me know the conference is happening this year. They also were like, "What do you want to give your viewers, or did you want to connect them to it?" I was like, "Hell yes!" And so there's a special discount code. You can go to this link right there, and also I think you can just go to the link and do it. But to make sure that you get the discount, you can do the discount code Damon, my name, Damon. I think the early bird ends. I just got an email from them I know I've said this a couple times, but I think it does literally end like tomorrow. So, they're not, I don't think the early bird's going to go into February. And February, again, as we're talking live, February begins on Saturday. So you might want to get on this. If you are a freelancer, if you're an independent journalist, particularly in this day and times, I have 2 degrees in journalism, and the newspaper business, the magazine business, the website business, whatever business you happen to be working on. As far as media, we're really in the wild, wild west, and sometimes we do not have the support of our publications. If you've been following the news for the past couple of months, particularly here in America, newspapers have been folding, not just as far as business wise folding, but also folding as far as the support of the journalists that are keeping the newspaper and the magazines running. There's been a lot of questionable decisions. This is the perfect time. If you're a current journalist, if you're a veteran like myself, or if you're up and coming, connect with your people. And frankly, no one's going to have our back, unlike as much as other independent freelance journalists. Even though I've expanded into ghostwriting, of course, public speaking, all that stuff, I'm still a journalist at heart. This is part of my journalism. You guys are part of that energy. That's one of the reasons why I'm independent. So if you're independent, you want to get your independent hustle, go ahead and check it out. It's worth checking out the conference. Tell them I sent you. If you happen to miss the show last week, we had the quick must reads, all books that would rise, hopefully not lower, rise or level up your emotional intelligence, help you get to the next level, and they all could be read in less than an hour. There's some bangers in there. There's some great feedback and great discussions that are happening as we speak. I just got some comments coming through on some of the shorts that were based on the discussion we had last week, where people were recommending books and all that stuff and all this game. It's fantastic. Thank you for contributing to it. I get 4 books that I will die on that hill are fantastic books that are worth your time for an hour and will help you raise your emotional intelligence. And there's some great recommendations that y'all are starting to put into the comments, which I appreciate. So be sure, do not miss that episode. It was a really fun episode. Today, we're going to talk about how to ask for what you want. How to ask for what you want. I'm middle aged, tell by the gray hair, a little bit of chub. And for me, and for many of us, we're still learning this basic tool. Now, you might be an entrepreneur, you might be moving and grooving within your corporate environment. Shout out to y'all that are doing the corporate thing. You might be like myself, where you're independent and you're doing your thing. You built up businesses, or you're working in a business. You might be doing your side hustles and so forth. You might be strong as far as asking for what you want in certain levels, but on another side, it might be harder for you to ask for what you want when it comes to certain things. And so I know people that are very strong as far as asking for what they want, demanding things in the corporate or business environment. And they go home or they're in their personal life and things are kind of falling apart because they can't say what they want to their married partner, or to their kids even, or to their parents, if their parents are still around. Like, it gets really complicated. So today we're going to talk about those certain things and figure out how we can actually ask for what we want. How do we go from that? And what does that mean? And we have a wonderful question that just popped up as far as journalism, because you saw me get on my rant. Thank you for the question, Octavia. In today's time, I think it's what's considered a journalist? Still have my glasses on. What's considered a journalist? Great question. From my definition, a journalist is someone who is reporting a particular topic or idea from some level of expertise. That expertise could be from their own experience, and that gets into the opinion columns. I've done 2 startups, and I sold my second one, so I can have a level of expertise when it comes to doing startups personally. It could be someone who talks to what we call SMEs, or subject matter experts, and actually breaks that down and says, "Okay, I talked to the person at OSHA, and they had this to say in regards to health and compliance in the corporate environment in America when it comes to safety, which is what OSHA does. Just spitballing here. So I think it's someone who has the ability to either have that expertise because of the experiences they've had, or they've connected the people, these subject matter experts, and are able to communicate that. I think the second level of it is having some level of objectivity and some level of insight that's beyond the average reader or person that's enjoying the content, reader, watcher, what have you. And Octavia, you kind of are asking a really good question and circling around what makes it difficult. And so I have a master's in magazine publishing and I have a bachelor's in journalism with a specialty in computing. I got those a long time ago. And so at that period of time, there was a thing where you could be a journalist and you need to have some type of there was a barrier to entry, and even gatekeepers, which we bemoan the idea of gatekeepers, particularly with a lot of the work that I do. And I've even said this on this program in the past 408 episodes. You definitely caught me saying that, as well as in the different books. There also is a positive to the gatekeeping in some cases, because if someone was on ABC, CBS, NBC, and maybe PBS, which were the four channels that we had when I was a kid, when I was the same age as my kids that I have right now, then there was a level of verification. Now, that doesn't mean that we are represented. We, however you want to take it. What it means is that there was a certain amount of credentials that came with that. And so a certain level of objectivity that at least was trying to be achieved. And one of the things that's happened with journalism is that that's kind of spread apart. And now it's become a lot more complicated. And now, if you got a microphone, I'm recording this on my on my phone, and it's through software that I'm able to get off the shelf, and I pay them a monthly fee, and it's simulcast to all the five platforms or so that I talked about at the beginning of this episode. So yes, I have 2 degrees in journalism, and also if I didn't have those, I still be speaking to y'all now. Do you know what I mean? So the idea of who is and isn't a journalist becomes a lot more complicated. So hopefully that helps a little bit. At least in my definition, it's someone who has a certain level of expertise and or access to expertise. So it'll be these subject matter experts. And kind of thing that's being implied, someone that has access to a platform. And the access to the platform is a lot bigger. Unfortunately, that level of expertise hasn't raised up with that. And so I didn't start this TV show until I'd already sold my 2 startups. And I think at that point I'd done 3 TED Talks, one on the second stage on the main conference up in Vancouver. And I think I'd already done 2 TEDx's here in the United States. So I didn't start talking to y'all until I had that level of expertise. But that's based on my criteria of what a journalist is. And it's like, all right, now I can start a TV show. Now I have some game to share. Now I have insights. I sold some startups. I'm of a certain age in my case, so I'm able to show up in a certain way. Not everyone has that criteria, and that's kind of one of the challenges with journalism. If we're going to talk about this, then I might as well go ahead and pass along something that coincidentally I actually did do with to the TED Foundation. And it's a video called How to Choose Your News. It's actually through TED Ed. And as y'all know, I've worked with TED behind the scenes as well. I'll go ahead and throw that in there as well. Excuse me. There we go. And so if you guys are watching the replay, the link is below. If you're not watching the replay and you're doing it live, then you can go ahead and click on there right there. But thank you so much for the question, and happy to go ahead. Happy to go ahead and talk about journalism, and because particularly in this period of time, it gets a lot more complicated. And thank you for the question again, Octavia. Again, this kind of got spurred upon, I'm assuming, by the IIJ conference happening exactly a month from now, February 27th, 28th, online, etc. You know, you go to the website. It's already pretty low cost right now. I think it's early bird special still for the next day or two. And also, you can use my code Damon to get even more off in there. Octavia, thank you for your wonderful question. And thanks, y'all, for your patience and indulging me as I talked about what journalism means and, frankly, I think where the future is going. So, when it comes to asking for what you want, that's one of the challenges is that sometimes we can be a certain way in one arena and differently in another arena. We could be very domineering or straightforward or direct, whatever term you want to use when it comes to our home environment or to when we're talking to our younger siblings or even when we're talking to our parents. And then we get to the job interview, or the job conversation or whatever, and suddenly we get very we get very demure. We get very mindful suddenly, and we don't know where it comes from. And I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, and one of my favorite quotes from him, probably my favorite quote, to paraphrase, is what remains unconscious to us, we consider fate. In other words, if we're not aware of how we're showing up, how we're talking, that we can be very direct in this environment and then indirect and don't ask for what we need in this other environment, we're going to assume we're just not good in that environment. We're going to assume that in the work environment, we're not getting paid what we're worth and not realize that part of that actually might come from how we're showing up. And vice versa, we might be disrespected or feel disrespected at home and feel angry and upset about that, but then not realize that we're not having that full conversation, that we're not actually showing up in a way that allows us to do so. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Octavia. I appreciate you. And so when we're talking about how to ask for things, we're going to focus on a few different things. We're going to focus on our ownership in those conversations. We're going to talk about the other person, organization, the individual, even multiple individuals if we're talking about a group, what their role is as far as how we're asking for what we want, and then our role as a whole. If we look at it as different pieces, my part, your part, our part, then it makes it easier to dissect it a little bit. So let's start with the very beginning. I think a good place to start when it comes to asking for what you want. I think a good place to begin is what do you really need versus, I'm sorry, what do you really want versus what do you really need? What do you really want versus what do you really need? This matters because sometimes we don't separate those things. Sometimes we say, no, I'm not negotiating anything, I'm taking it all. Now, that could come from a place of anger. Been there before. It could come from a place of hurt. It could come from a place of fear. Because, rest in peace to Tupac. I get and MC Breed. I gotta get mine. You better get yours. Sometimes that's the energy we come from. My folks are from the hood, so I understand and respect that. But we're assuming this is a relatively safe environment, right? We're going to assume that we're discussing something that is relatively simple. Hey, can you do the dishes because they're starting to smell up and I don't want bugs in the house. That's an ask. That's a negotiation. Even something as simple as that. Yeah, I'm putting a lot of work into this environment and I'm helping contribute to this corporation. And I think it's time for me to have a little bit more equity or to have some type of raise, some type of compensation that matches that. That's a discussion. That's an ask. Hey, I'd like a little bit more hugs. Some more physical touch would be great. That's an ask too. We sometimes get confused because we don't realize when we're doing an ask. We feel like some folks feel like it's a demand. Other folks feel like that it's too small to discuss and it's not really worth the time. And that actually has to do with a lot of inner stuff that we deal with. If we're going to go and sort the wants and the needs, those things that are nice to haves, as we say, versus those things that are mandatory, it helps to kind of go through this simple process. Number one, to find out what your non-negotiables are. So find out what your non-negotiables are. I'd say maximum of three things in whatever you're trying to do. If it's if it's a job offer or a job opportunity, and you say, okay, it has to be a commute less than 30 minutes or no commute. I have to have flex days so I can take care of my kids in case they need me or whatever the case may be. Um, and 2 weeks vacation time minimum per year. And this is the United States. We have a lot less vacation than some of y'all international viewers. So you might be shocked, but you will only get a couple weeks vacation in the corporate world. Those could be your non-negotiables. So then if they're like, you know what, if you do that, then mm, you know, maybe you end up getting paid in the lower end of that range because excuse me, most corporate positions have a certain range. And it's like, okay, well, you'll be at the lower end if you want that kind of flexibility. And your want in the want column might be, okay, I want to be at the top of the cap. I want to be capped out, as they say in the NBA. It's like, well, you can be capped out, but you want the short commute or you want to work from home and you you want the two weeks vacation or whatever, and you definitely want flex days and the opportunity to do hybrid. Okay, well, one of these things has to give, and we sometimes have a hard time for that. Sometimes we feel so that that's bad bargaining. It's not. It's just there's a certain amount of resources that we have with that. How are you going to be at the top of the salary, but then you also want the bonus vacation and or the flex time? Now, something happens when we're in different situations, and then it changes the dynamics. I remember Kanye West talking about this when he was asking Jay Z for certain things because Jay Z mentored him and so forth. And he thought Jay Z and his company were being unreasonable. And then Kanye West became a business owner. And suddenly he's like, oh, there's only so many resources. Or if we have all this flex time, then only X amount of production will happen. So there's a level of empathy that happens that sometimes we don't have. So if we get into the us versus them mentality, then we might be losing the practicality of it. We'll talk about that in the next segment. So the first step, I think, is figuring out what your non-negotiables are, no more than three. If your non-negotiables come into a laundry list, then your opportunity is to find a partnership, however you define partnership. It could be applied to any of those, romantic or otherwise. Your opportunity to find success, your opportunity to negotiate well, where you're able to get some, if not all, of what you want diminish rapidly. If you've ever talked to someone that was looking for like a mate, like someone to go out with, but even deeper than that, like someone like a partner or someone to marry, have kids with, or whatever, that long-term thing. If you looked at someone who had been unemployed for a long time, and then they end up having this laundry list of all these things that they absolutely needed from this job. Even I own several different intellectual properties, and if you coach with me or if you've familiar with this program, you know that's a really big part of power. Some people own houses, some people own virtual things, some people own concepts or ideas and how they're executed. I'm in the latter camp where intellectual properties are my piece of the pie, right? So I own all the intellectual properties to, at this point, all of my books and et cetera, et cetera. That's my energy. I know people that have intellectual properties or have opportunities or even sitting on physical properties, however you define that, some type of asset, and the asset's just rusting out because they're not willing to compromise or negotiate because their list of non-negotiables is so long. And so they could be really low on money, but they're not willing to move or use that intellectual property or asset because when they try to partner with people or they try to work with people in that, they're so inflexible it doesn't happen. I've coached folks, I've been friends and cool with folks that I talk to them about something and they have a whole laundry list of things. And then they wonder why it's not working. So I'd say number one, figure out what those non-negotiables are. Be honest with yourself. What are those three or less things that you will die on that hill? That's what it's about. Next, figure out what the nice to haves are. What exactly would be great. It would be great to have a frappuccino machine when I come into the office. I would love to have that. I work from home, so it doesn't matter. But you understand, you understand what I'm getting at. It would be great to be partnered with someone and they were a millionaire. That would be great. Because then there will be so many moves we'd be able to make as a partnership. That would be fantastic. It would be great if I can do this job and just work from my pajamas and make six figures. That would be great. That falls into the nice to have categories. Not saying that might be mandatory. Any of them might be mandatory for you. But those kind of things that are a little bit softer, it's all like, oh, that would be nice. I'd like that. It's kind of like the equivalent of a cherry on top, right? And you're like, oh, that's great. But it's kind of like building on a foundation. Your need to haves, your non-negotiables, those things are the foundation. So you could have all the cherries on tops as you want, but if the foundation is messed up, if your need to haves, your non-negotiables aren't there, it's going to fall apart. It's not going to make it. These are foundational things that will actually allow, I'm really big into partnerships, that will allow the partnership to flourish, or at least increase the chances of it flourishing. You need to have that together. So the first step is really figuring out what your non-negotiables are, no more than three. The second step is figuring out what your nice to haves are. And the third part, which I think is really important, the things you don't care about. You don't care. You really don't care. I'm not a big holiday guy. So whether I'm partnering with someone romantically or I'm doing some type of corporate thing and I've gone for corporate jobs and negotiated with them and stuff. So if I'm going for a corporate job or whatever, having certain holidays off, or being with someone who's really into holidays, it doesn't matter to me. There's one or two holidays I care about per year. And even that, it's pretty low key. Don't care. Don't care. I've seen people fight for things that they don't care about just because they felt as though the other party was getting over on them. But they didn't care about it. It was more the principality of it. Shout out in the comments if you know what movie that's from. It was more fighting for the principality of it. That's what mattered to them. And then it didn't work out. You fought on a principle that wasn't even a principles of yours to begin with. That is deep. And we're talking losing relationships, losing potential business deals, losing jobs, and then still complaining. So when it comes to knowing what you need to have versus what you want to have, get into those three categories. Non-negotiables, three or less. These are the things that are so important to you. If it's more than three, there's something off. Number two, you figure out your nice to haves. It'll be nice to have this. This will make this will sweeten the pot, as they say in gambling. This will sweeten the pot. And lastly, those things that you don't care about. Those things you don't care about, give it to them or let it go. And that way you have a strong idea as far as what to ask for. A lot of my negotiations, they've turned out better when I was definitive as far as what my non-negotiables were. 100%. Because then I'm able to come in and say, okay, this is the need. I'm not asking for everything. These are the important things. Three or less. That's it. I'd love to hear in the comments. How do you guys negotiate? How do things go for you? Yeah, as you've negotiated, particularly in this environment where money's been funny and there's a lot of change, particularly and upheaval, particularly here in the United States. Has that changed how you've asked for things? Have you been more reluctant to ask for things? Or have you gotten way more aggressive and direct as far as what your needs and wants are? Let me know in the comments. I love to hear. If you want to go deeper into this, I would highly recommend probably the best book that I recommend here on this episode, Crucial Conversations by, I'm not even going to go through the list, the litany of authors in there. I was always amazed by this book. I don't think I've seen one other book, aside from academic journals and all those things, that have had four authors. I'm sorry, five. I didn't get the number right. Five. I have the wrong number of fingers up. Five authors on there, and they do an amazing job. Crucial Conversations is really about when you have to step up and talk about something that makes you uncomfortable. Notice I didn't say uncomfortable conversation, and I didn't say uncomfortable for you, another person. I said uncomfortable for you. It's an uncomfortable conversation for you. I've been married. I've had how many startups? I co-founded one startup. I've co-authored at least 12 books. I've done 27 books. I'd say about half of them are co-authorships. In all those different dynamics, all the different types of partnerships that I've been in, sometimes something will be so uncomfortable to you, and you'll be losing sleep over. You'll be stressing. You'll be like, "Yo, they're about to flip out," or they're gonna be like, "No, da da da," and then, excuse me, you go and you have that conversation, and they're like, "Oh yeah, sure." And you're like, "Oh." This has happened to me a few months ago, which some inside stories I will share in a future episode. But it was like, oh, you're like, yeah, that's fine. It's not a big deal. But to you, it's a big deal. This is really about us as individuals. This has nothing to do with the other person per se. It has to do with I'm uncomfortable with this situation. And sometimes when you're uncomfortable with a situation and or conversation, that uncomfortableness actually makes it worse. So if you have a tough conversation or something that you're perceiving as tough that's coming up, absolutely get this book because then it'll help chill you out. Because sometimes those vibes, sometimes that energy, sometimes the take that we have, sometimes we end up doing this counterpoint, which I'll get into later, but we end up reacting in a certain way because we assume the other person's going to react. It's kind of like that old school high school dating thing. I'm going to break up with this person because I know they want to break up with me. The same type of thing, except now we're talking thousands, if not millions of dollars. Now we're talking about a marriage or a long-term partnership. Now we're talking about a relationship with our kids or a relationship with our job. Like now we're talking about our livelihood. The stakes are way too high for us to be playing the games like that. This is part of that energy. Definitely grab that book. Something along those lines. How to deal with difficult people. I did a live show 373, I think it was about a year ago. So I think it was last summer. And we had a fantastic conversation talking about how to deal with difficult people. If there's someone that you need to work with, if it's someone that you're in partnership with, if it's an organization that just seems difficult, and it happens, then you need to figure out how to operate within their system or to create a better system from that. That's the best way to go, and that gives you an opportunity to do that. Yep. Uh, Crucial Conversations is a go-to for my consultancy. Love the concept of thank you. I was trying to remember the concept, the story I'm telling myself. So this gets into narrative. Thank you. Thank you for the comment. This gets into narrative. What narrative are you telling yourself? What narrative are you telling yourself? The fact is that there's a 99.9% chance that the narrative and story that you're telling yourself that you consider quote unquote the truth is not what the other person or the other people involved, if it's an organization, are believing as well. It doesn't overlap. It doesn't overlap. Thank you for the comment. As I said, I've been in many different types of partnerships. Partnerships are a big part of the business that I do, as well as my personal stuff, of course. I got two beautiful kids from a partnership. That's part of that energy. I don't know how many times I believed this was the truth. Again, to quote you again, uh, the story I'm telling myself. So many times I believed that. And then it was like, talk to someone else, and it's like, oh, no, that's not how I see it at all. It's like, oh, the nice thing is that once you have the foundation for who you are, bigger conversation, then you're able to go ahead and say, this is what I need versus what I want. Your needs, as I said, should only be like three things max. Why are you having this conversation? Again, they get deeper into that in Crucial Conversations. And I talk about that also in that recent episode, talking about how to get along with difficult people. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, or otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Work TV. You can subscribe for free, for sure. And Octavia, thank you for the comment. Normally, when I ask for something, I tend to get it when it's like reduced pricing or refunds, etc. But I found when asking for the high-end sale, I'm willing to lower my price. I don't like that. Yeah, that's tough. That's tough because then it's almost like a game of chicken, right? It's like a staring contest. I appreciate the honesty, Octavia, but it is like that. That's tough. One of the things that has helped me is staying fixed in whatever my price is and not offering sales and not doing reduced pricing, particularly when it's seasonal things. And the reason I do that is number one, it forces me to stick to my guns. Number two, as you might have experienced, sometimes people wait for the quote unquote Black Friday sale, as I say here in the United States, the Black Friday sale, or the New Year sale, or whatever, and end up not purchasing your product. And then they forget about it, right? Because they're waiting for that sale, and hopefully they'll buy it then. The third part about it is that it forces me, and to this day, to come up with alternative things that are more affordable and to leave the high end stuff high end. Coaching with me one on one is high end. My rates are right on my website. No curtain to look behind or anything. So if you go to danebrown.net, you know that how much it costs to coach one on one with me. These books, sometimes Amazon or one of the platforms have a sale, but other than that, they don't go on sale. You can get it through my website or anywhere else. But I have this show, this is episode 408. So I've come to y'all 408 times, and unless you bought stuff from me and you wanted to, this doesn't cost anyone a dime. And we got 18,000 subscribers that have plugged in and more that I've viewed. My whole point is that it allows me to separate different things and make it into this is the high end thing that is rare, that is not negotiated, unless it's very special circumstances. And then there are the things that are available that work like that. And that's great. Thank you for chiming in. Also understanding the difference between price and cost. Exactly. So you could have the price of something, and the price is okay, let's say it costs $100 to work with me. It costs more than that, but let's just run with the analogy. $100 to work with me. Cool. That's $100 out of your pocket. Hey, $100 matters. Thank you. $100 matters, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. But then what's the cost of not working with me? Well, if you're not working with me or someone like me and you're stuck in your business, that's a much higher cost than the $100 you just spent. I live in Las Vegas. $100 is a nice meal for two people, right? Or the way my kids eat. Maybe just my kids eating, right? That is the price. The cost, though, there's an experience that my family won't have. In the case of business, if you're not working with someone or you're not spending that time putting the price into it, and price goes into time as well. The time you're spending hanging out with me on this program. That I might say one thing, you might think most of it is goofy, and then I say this one line and then unlock something, and suddenly your business skyrockets. I'm not saying I have that kind of power. What I'm saying is that folks like myself, if we have certain knowledge and y'all are willing to put the resources or the time into it, the price, then that far outweigh whatever cost there happens to be, or whatever that cost can outweigh the price of whatever you'd be giving up. You spend 45 minutes with me, and exactly, you finish my point. Stay stuck or stay the same, exactly. And you get ready before you be ready, or for some reason I can't talk today. You understand what I'm saying? You stay ready so you don't have to get ready. One of my favorite sayings, I can't say it today, but you stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And so even just a few days ago, I'm reading new books, listening to webinars and stuff. Even though I have this show, I'm still learning. In fact, I feel like having this show becomes a mandate for me to learn. And I think that's a really important part to it. And if you're not going to be doing that, then it makes it way more difficult for you to show up and say, all right, I'm not going to pay this particular price because I don't want to do this, that, and the third. And it's like, yeah, but what's the cost to your long-term engagement with that? And once you get to that point, then it makes it a lot harder to show up in a particular way. I actually did a video, excuse me, talking about this, and I'll go ahead and share with you right now. There we go. Right, why price isn't cost. It's actually one of my favorite videos. It came out about 2 years ago or so, and I talk about the concept of price versus cost. Thanks again for that comment as well, and breaking it down because there is a big difference in that. That's right there in the show notes. Let me know. Let me know what you think about that. Be sure and check it out. Of course, you can check it out on the replay. I'll be sure and throw it in there. Love this conversation. I appreciate y'all. So, when it comes to asking for what you want, separate it between your needs and your wants. Your needs should only be three things non negotiable. You're not going to do it otherwise. And you're going to show up in a certain way because of that. And from that, you're very welcome. And because of that, you'll have an opportunity to negotiate on a higher level. When it comes to asking for what you want, excuse me, until it's allergy season. When it comes to asking what you want, the second step is what do they need to show up as their best? When it comes to negotiating and asking for what you want, what do they need to show up as their best? We so often forget this because we think about what we want and we kind of I just talked about in the previous segment, we are just talking about with the comments too. We kind of stop there and it's like, oh, okay, well, I got what I needed. All right, whatever. Okay. I need to get what I want. Well, there's other parts in the equation, and it doesn't have to do necessarily in an altruistic or you should think about other people or the golden rule. It's nothing highfalutin, even nothing ethical about it per se. Even though I love talking about ethics and mores, I think they're important to our society. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is those non-negotiables you have, and even the nice to haves that you have. Are they going to impede this other party, this organization, this partnership, these other folks from showing up as their best? What I mean by that is if you say, if we work together, I need to get 95% of the cover price of whatever I sell. Would that mean that the organization or distributor that you're working with, whether it's music or I deal a lot with publishing and books and other things, would that make them go out of business? Sure, you can get 95% of the cover price. Let's take it back to the Michael Jackson era, back when I was a kid. And it's like, okay, the album costs $10 or the book costs $10. Remember that? That was a long time ago. This costs $10. Okay, the artist wants 95% of the cover price. Okay. So how are we going to pay for the paper? How are we going to pay for the wax? I'm a vinyl guy. So how are we going to pay for the wax? How are we going to distribute it? How are we going to get to the stores? How are we going to pay for the manufacturing plants that are going to create? Like once you understand the big picture of how business works, then maybe that 95% of the cover price and demanding that, and that being your non-negotiable, maybe it doesn't make any sense because it's going to bankrupt Epic Records or it's going to bankrupt, Penguin Random House. I can go on all day. Like it's going to bankrupt those. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable. Now, of course, you don't want the other end where you're getting 1% of the cover price. You're getting a dime for every for every $10 album or book sold. I've seen people with those deals. You don't want those deals. What you want though is something that actually allows the other party to succeed. If you're taking all the resources and demanding all the resources, then not only are you sabotaging the success of the other party, but you're also sabotaging the amount and success, whatever metric you use, that you're going to get. If I came in, and again, I've had independent books for a while, and I've negotiated with the bigger publishers, I was already a best-selling author. If I had certain demands on my table, and I'm wise enough to have an agent, so shout out to my agent, you know, excuse me and my agent are in there and saying, okay, well, we're going to get 50% of the cover price. unless you're, what's his name, James Patterson or someone. But even a James Patterson deal, if you're familiar with the famous author who writes thrillers, even James Patterson takes on, he has a whole company and he takes on some of the advertising. Look it up. Fascinating enterprise. So it's really a business partnership. Like he already has a business. He has a whole function thing. He's not an individual author or someone like myself who has a small publishing company. He has, I think he's in Texas. He has a warehouse in Texas and full-time employees and all these things. He really is a publishing company in himself. So even when he's saying, I want 50% of the cover price, which I believe was his deal that he made 15 years ago, when he's doing that, he's saying, I'm actually going to, but to do that, I'm actually going to take some of the pressure off. I'll pay for the advertising in the New York Times and, the, the full page ad. I'll do some of that. So even the case of the big dogs, including MJ, to a lesser extent, including Prince, and I've done some videos about both of them. Feel free to go to bringingworth.tv and check it out. In fact, I have a Prince video on the front page right now that I did about a year ago. But if you go to bringingworth.tv, you'll see it on the front page. You can check it out. But in studying these masters, no pun intended as far as the masters, in studying these masters, it's like even they, as uncompromising as they were, knew how the business worked. So if you're negotiating, you have to understand how the business actually works of the people that you're negotiating with for a few different reasons. Number one, again, if you do the wrong move and ask for too much, you're going to sabotage them. Like they're going to give it to you anyway. But if they did, they'd be out of business. But number two, which people don't think about, if you don't understand the business that you're negotiating in, and the other person that you're talking with obviously knows the business because they're business, you're going to reflect how ignorant you are. Not as a personal attack, just it just is. So if you want a record deal and you go to, I don't know, Universal Music Group or one of those guys, and you say, "Oh, okay, I'm the hottest thing on the street. I'm really high on the Spotify playlist, and I've sold X amount of CDs out of or USB, things out of my trunk." Da da da. They're like, "Great, we're happy to give you a deal." You're like, "Great, I want 75% of every album sold." They're gonna be like, "You don't understand the math at all. You should go. We'll get someone else." Or worse than that, they'll set up the contract in a way where it makes it seem like ego-wise that you're getting a better deal, but they're actually hurting you on the back end. We can get to a whole discussion about that. I've seen people come in there with the belief that I need to get everything that's on the table, including the things that I want. If I don't do that, then I'm going to walk. And one of two things happens. Either people are like, bye, or they'll say, sure, you can get whatever you want. And then ends up being more like the equivalent of a figurehead or something that's an empty promise that doesn't mean anything. It's the equivalent of which I've seen kind of negotiations where folks are like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and co-author this book, but my name needs to be first on the cover. Uh, okay, but then on the back end, the other authors that are involved, or even the publishing company, is actually making more on the royalties. But they're so worried about having their name bigger. So there's a level of ignorance that you're going to have to overcome. So when you're asking for things, particularly in the business world, then you got to know the ropes. And greed isn't going to get you there. Trying to say, I'm going to go ahead and get everything that I can out of this, and I'm going to suck the blood out of this, which we'll talk about in a second, it's not going to get you there. So whatever you're doing, is it going to is it going to hurt the business or really hurt the business of the people that you're negotiating with? Will the people hold ill will against you, which we'll talk about in a second? Remember, you still got to work with these folks. And lastly, and I was talking to someone about this recently, how can you help them shine brighter? How can you help them shine brighter? So there's a way that, in many cases, where you can get what you want and even get what you need across the board as much as possible. Let's say, I won't say across the board, as much as possible. But by you getting what you need and even what you want, then you're able to level up. If you're getting a $50,000 advance for some work that you're doing, and you say, you know what, I really need 75. But if I do 75, then that means that I'll have less financial pressure. I'll have a longer runway. I talk about runway at bringyourworth.tv if you don't know what that means. Excuse me, but basically the amount of money that you, how long the money you currently have will sustain you, your family, and your business. That's called runway. And if I get to 75,000, then I'm able to show up more presently because I won't be worried about where I'm going to get this extra 25K from. You see how that works? So it's not just saying, give me 25,000 more or give me 50% more on this advance. It's also saying these are the benefits for all of us. If I'm doing this work, don't you want me to be fully engaged or do you want me to worry about money? You don't have to put it that blunt, but I guess it depends on the negotiation. But that's basically what you're saying. You're showing the advantages of them, and you're also showing that you know what's important to them. So that same exercise we talked about in the beginning, where their need to haves, their non-negotiables, their wants, and the ones they don't care about. Trying to do that analysis on the other parties involved. It helps a lot, and it will allow you to show up in a certain way that's better, and it's not just about me, 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 me. Great book on this. Highly recommended. 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Hope you're doing well, Mr. Greene. Fantastic book. It talks about the different ways that essentially how human nature works. And some of the stuff in there is heavy, some of the stuff in there is dark, and I'd say all the stuff in there, understanding it is essential. 48 basic laws about how people operate. This is a universal thing. I love, love, love the storytelling. It's by Robert Greene. Behind the scenes, Ryan Holiday was involved. Shout out to Ryan Holiday. You might know him from Daily Stoic. I've talked about that book many times over the last few years. And the amount of research and resources and storytelling going from Greek mythology to here in the United States with P.T. Barnum a century and a half ago, going all the way to, excuse me, some of the stuff that Tesla, the real Tesla, Nikola, not the car company, the real Tesla, 2 centuries ago was dealing with overseas, and some of that drama that came over here, to issues with Napoleon when he was in France, da 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 da. These beautiful stories talking about how people were able to negotiate and discuss things to their gain, and sometimes in the gain of everyone that was involved. The wit and the wisdom that comes from people, real people in most cases, aside from mythology, real people that were able to figure out things and to understand how to get their needs met, no matter how harsh the environment. Really important part. Continuing this conversation is awkward conversations and how to master them, how to be smarter about them. There's actually an early episode, I believe it's a live episode from probably about 3 years ago. So shortly after the channel launch, we get much deeper into this. And yeah, so please go and check out that episode as well if you want to go deeper. And getting centered before an interaction. Yes. Thank you for the comment. So getting centered before an interaction. So that means knowing what your worth is, wink, wink, understanding the worth of the other party. You understanding the dynamics, power dynamics, the resource dynamics, the needs of the parties involved. That's not a bad thing. Again, going back to the 48 laws of power, that's not a bad thing. If I'm a first time author and I'm talking with Penguin Random House, right? If if I'm executive producer and creator of a show that has 18,000 subscribers, and there's a new startup that wants to do advertisement with it. Those are two very different power dynamics, and there's nothing wrong with talking about power. I think when I was younger, I felt like there was something wrong with it, but as a lot of us have, but it's not. Those are the particular dynamics. That's what matters. What do I really, really, really want for myself out of this meeting? What do I really, really want for the other person out of this meeting? And first one has nothing to do with material. The first one has nothing to do with you. Lovely. I'm glad you paraphrased. I appreciate that. And if I really wanted these things, how would I show up? Bottom line, I appreciate the comments. Thank you. Gold comments. So in this case, whatever you're asking for, that list of non-negotiables, or it might just be one non-negotiable, but no more than three. What do you think the non-negotiables are for the other party? What are those things that can't be changed, that can't be negotiated? They just are. And then that sets up those boundaries that allows you to show up. In your negotiations, have there been times where you realized that you weren't thinking about the other party? And how did you rectify it? Was it too late? I'd love to hear in the comments. Let me know. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. I'm here at Bring Your Worth TV, episode 408 that you're watching right now. I'm here live on Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Subscribe on your favorite platform. The home mothership. I still haven't come up with a term with it. Maybe you guys have a term you can come up with it. The main channel, we'll call it, and Bring Your Worth.tv. You can also check it out. On Twitch. Older episodes on Spotify and wherever you get your channels. But let me know. How are you guys dealing with those partnerships? And when did you realize that your ask didn't really include the other person? I'd love to hear. When it comes to how you can ask for something, what choices will decide your dynamics 5 years from now? If you're adulting, if you run a business, if you lead a household, if you're married or some type of long-term partnerships, if you're a co-author, if you work with certain organizations, if you have a job, chances are you're going to see them again. Whoever you're negotiating with, you're going to see them again. If you're married or in a long-term partnership, you can go and have a drop down, dirty fight. I don't mean fist fight, but I mean just argument. Going for the jugular, going at each other, all that stuff. And then it's nighttime and you're getting in the same bed. You're living in the same house. You wake up in the morning, and if you got kids like I do, the kids got to get fed. The bills got to get paid. You're still seeing this person's family, vice versa. Do you really want to do the Oppenheimer option? Do you really want to hit the red button? Whatever you're asking for, whatever you're fighting for, maybe literally as far as verbal fighting, what impact will that have on that dynamic? I like to go 5 years out. Some people are a lot shorter. Some people say 90 days. No 90-day fiance. But some people go 90 days and say, okay, if I win this, quote unquote, how's it gonna look? What happens when this organization or this individual needs something from me, and we have a symbiotic relationship where it goes back and forth? If you have a roommate and you have a beef with them, and I've had plenty of roommates, particularly in my college years and grad school years. And again, you end up hitting the nuclear button, and you get exactly what you want. Every single thing on your list. You got a lease with that fool for another 3 months, 6 months, year. Depends on what state you're in. You sign a contract with this person. This is a partnership. Most importantly, if you are a supervisor and you have subordinates, or if you are an individual, an employee, and you have a supervisor or a boss, whatever term you want to use, you're going to have to work with them the next day. And whether it's passive aggressive ways or just aggressive ways, there's ways where if you're not considerate as far as what you ask for, how you show up, then they can make your life way harder than it needs to be. So it becomes more about a give and take. Simon Sinek has a great term for that. It's called the long game. It's actually not his term, but he made it popular about a decade and a half ago. And the long game, as well as Dory Clark, shout out to Dory. So it's Dory Clark as well as Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek talked about the infinite game, and then Dory Clark talked about the long game. Shout out to both of them. The basic idea is this: there are infinite games and there's finite games. Finite games are games like football. Shout out to New Orleans, happening this weekend. There's going to be a winner at the Super Bowl. It's going to be 4 quarters. It's going to be, I'm sure, some touchdowns. There'll be Kendrick Lamar. Shout out to him. And then it's going to be over. And everybody's going to go home. Hopefully have a safe time in Bourbon Street. Shout out to my people down there. Hope you guys are doing better. And everybody's going to have a great time. And then guess what? A year later, it's going to happen again. But for right now, they are the Super Bowl champions of the world. That's a finite game. Really simple, really clear. These are the rules. This is how it's set up. Da, da, da. Got it. And then there's infinite games. Again, not Simon Sinek's concept, but he had a beautiful book called The Infinite Game that talked about it deeper. Infinite games are being married, as long as you're married. Infinite games are being a parent or being a child. Infinite games are having a co-founder. I've done all these things. Many of y'all that are watching probably have too. These infinite games, there is no ending. I mean, you could get divorced, someone that you're involved with could pass away. You could pass away. So technically, but in the grand scheme of things, they're infinite games. There is no winner and there is no loser. And I think one of the challenges we have when we negotiate and ask for something we want is that we feel like there has to be a winner or a loser. I'm going to get everything on my list or I lost. The secret though, whether it's Dory or Simon talking, the secret is that there's always going to be another list. There's always going to be another desire, another thing that you must have. That list of 3 or less non-negotiables, they're evolving as much as you're evolving, as much as the cells in our body, die off and replicate every 7 years. It's a shift of thesis. If you're up on your Greek mythology, it just keeps reproducing, changing ever more. So if you're putting all your chips, remember I'm a Vegas guy, so if you're putting all your chips into this one fight, this one negotiation, this one ad, you're pushing everything in there, and the other parties involved are like, fine, you can have it. God, why are you going so hard? And you're like, yeah, I got it. This ain't the Super Bowl. Kendrick's not gonna come out at halftime. You're not in New Orleans. This isn't finite. You're gonna have to wake up next day or go to work the next day, or you're gonna need something else, and you're gonna talk to this party, this organization, these individuals, this partner, and they're gonna be like, yo, you just hit the detonator. And that might be the end of the partnership, might be the end of your job. It might be a subordinate or an employee that doesn't want to rock with you anymore. It can get really ugly because you were solely focused on getting this battle when, if you want to use the bad analogy, when it really was a war. Infinite games are the war. Infinite games are the long game. Again, shout out to both Dory Clark as well as Simon Sinek. I love y'all. and fantastic works. Okay, you got it. You got it. I'm originally from South Jersey, so I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to argue with you. We'll see how that holds up this weekend. But I'm a fan of Kendrick. I'm only rooting for Kendrick, to be honest. See, there's that little bit of, see, that's why I'm a journalist, but not really a journalist because I'm definitely going to show my bias. But when it comes to the games, there's the infinite games and there's the finite games. Knowing where you stand on that, I think makes a big difference. So if you want to go deeper into it, a book I highly recommend. Actually, I have a physical book here. It's called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Luis. I got his name right. I don't. I used to know Spanish a little bit. Now I know no Spanish. Go figure. Fantastic book. It talks about the four agreements. The four agreements are. He has at the beginning. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. That third one is a banger to me. Don't make assumptions. So you can't really assume where other people are coming from, organizations or otherwise. You can't know what their motivations are because unless you're Professor X or you're some type of mutant from the X-Men, you can't read minds. So you're going to have to communicate in a certain way. I talked about that at the top of the episode, the excellent book, Crucial Conversations. All the links are below with all the stuff I'm talking about. Or if you don't see the links on there, you can go over to bringyourworth.tv and the links are on the main channel. This book is fantastic because then it kind of takes kind of the scorpion venom out of the argument or out of the discussion, out of the ask, because you don't know where they're coming from. And you show up as your best, as we talked about earlier in our episode, chances are they're going to show up as their best as well. Again, this actually almost made the tiny book list that I did a week or two ago. It's a fantastic little book. You can read it in the afternoon. It is so, so good. And it's a good primer for that kind of thing. Yes, yes, I'm so glad you read the book. Yes, there's a fifth agreement book that I just heard about, and I have not read it yet. This I just read this book about a year ago, to be honest. I was late to this book, but thank you, Octavia. Maybe I'll go ahead and check out the fifth agreement and report back and share some of that with y'all. But yeah, thank you for that. The fourth agreement, four agreements is so good. I read it. I think I got it 2 years ago. I think I've been reading it pretty much every year since then. So I think I read it at least twice, maybe three times. And it's such a good book because you have to remember that other people are human as well. One of the most popular episodes, in fact, it might be the most popular episode on Bring Your Worth TV, Brene Brown's Secret to Accepting Difficult People. It's super short. Um, Episode 27. This is super early on. And it really started that discussion as far as how we show up for other people, how we can honor other people while also honoring our own boundaries. We just finished the holidays here in the States, and there's family stuff, there's family drama, all these things. How can we be loving and, as they say in Buddhism, come with loving kindness while also respecting our boundaries? In other words, there's also loving kindness towards ourselves. That's really what this episode is about. Not just the Brene Brown episode, but this episode in general. I talk about that in the newsletter. In fact, I forgot to show that in the beginning. Let me go and show that in there, but it's in the links below if you guys happen to miss it. Where is the newsletter? Oh, there it is. Newsletter is Why Any Old Thing Will Do, Saves newsletter. It's at joindamon.me. Let's go to joindamon.me. You go subscribe for free. It comes out every Wednesday. And talking about how we often settle for a false sense of peace, but we're angry behind the scenes. Where in reality, it should be the reverse. If we're going to have healthiness, then it should be discussing with the people that we love, with the people that we want to work with or currently work with, what our needs are. And then true partnership, good relationships, have the other people involved, or organizations involved, helping provide what we need. But us sitting back angry as far as how people are acting and saying things aren't fair, I mean, that's part of adulting. We have to show up and say whatever is on our mind. Again, unless you're unless you got telekinesis or not telekinesis, but you're a mind reader, then you're not going to be able to know why people do what they do, why organizations show up while they show up. I remember it was one organization where they were having trouble paying my invoices, and come to find out there was stuff going on behind the scenes, and it wasn't a matter of me saying you better pay this freaking invoice, even though I felt that way. I got mouths to feed, but it was more like me being curious and inquisitive and saying, okay, what's going on? And they were like, oh yeah, this is what's happening. Really sorry, da da. And we ended up working things out. But that discussion needs to happen again by not making assumptions about other people or other organizations as far as how they're showing up and why they're showing up that way. This episode, which I think is one of the reasons why you guys have liked the episode so much, is it talks about that. It's only a 7-minute episode. I think you guys would appreciate it. And How to Win the Long Game, The Infinite Game, starring Simon Sinek, and talking about his work and going deeper into what I talked about today. It's about a 10-minute episode. I had read his book, Infinite Game. I think it came out 6, 7 years ago. I think it came out when the pandemic hit. So I want to say 5 years ago. Fantastic book, definitely worth reading. I have the audio book, and actually the links are in there as far as if you want to pick up the Infinite Game. When it comes to the things that you guys are negotiating and trying to figure out, what moves are you making or what moves can you make to keep that partnership or that relationship healthy in the next 90 days to 5 years? Are you making moves while you're asking and negotiating for things that are actually contributing to the health of that dynamic versus contributing to having ill will down the road? The wonderful saying, song by Alan Toussaint. I know the version by Little Feat, which if you know your New Orleans bands, they're classic. Love, love, love the song. It's called On Your Way Down. And it's like the folks that you mistreat on your way up, you might you might you might hit them on your way down. In other words, the dynamics and the power shifts, which is why I talked about the 48 allows for power earlier this episode. They can shift at any moment. As I said in my books, including in the it's mentioned in the complete Bring Your Worth collection. Again, the links are all below. I talked about how there are people that got me into that respective business who I looked up to, who are at the top of the heap. And then within a few years, they're calling me asking if they knew about if I knew about any job opportunities, freelance or otherwise. Those dynamics had changed within a few years. It's not a flex on my part or a flex on theirs. That's just the way the world works. And what goes up must comes down. Spinning wheel goes round and round. Pick a song. You see Coltrane over there. I'm a song guy, but pick a song. There's a reason why these songs exist. Pick a decade. There's a song about what you do on the way up, but you might need those people on the way down. You might need them to help you. This is part of that dynamic as far as looking at the long game and looking at the infinite game. I've had moments where I took those relationships and those dynamics for granted, and suddenly a situation changed. And sometimes you have to humble yourself. Let me know in the comments. Were there moments where you had to kind of take a break and be like, oh, yeah, let me not fight as hard because still need to work with these people or this organization the next day. Maybe I'll share some other stories from the front line in a future episode. I'm entrepreneurial coach Damon Brown. If you want to go and work with me, feel free to come over to damebrown.net. There's messaging on there. You can shoot me a DM, whatever. I'd love to go and support you as a coach. And maybe we can do a free consultation and see if we'd be good working together. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV, episode 408, talking about how to ask for things. Leave a comment below. Even if you're watching the replay, I'd love to hear about how you guys are dealing with that. And if any of this is useful, you can subscribe on any of the platforms for free, including at the main page. That's the word I'm looking for. Main page over at bringyourworth.tv. Until next Wednesday, I appreciate y'all. Remember, you can always bring your worth. You can always build from now. Thank you for coming through. And as far as consulting and coaching, you go to damebrown.net, and then there should be a link at the very top that says work with Damon if you guys are interested in it. Thanks for your comments from all of y'all. And this is such a great show. I appreciate today's episode because y'all are really coming through. But I appreciate y'all and much love. Peace. Oh, and I'll go ahead and get the link right there. We'll do the extended thing. Thank you for the question, Octavia. Give me 1 second. That is a legit question. And I think I have it in the links below as well. There we go. You know what, Octavia, you're on top of things, and I think I'll start including that in the links because yeah, I have a lot of stuff on. As you can tell, I'm a pretty diverse person. The link is right there. Thank you, Octavia. I appreciate you. Coach with me. You go to damebrown.net. Just click that. It'll also be in the links below and the replay that you guys are watching. Thanks again, Octavia, as well as the other comments that came through. I appreciate y'all. And for real, I'm going to wrap up the show. Remember, you can always bring your worth. You can always build from now. Take care of yourselves and others. Peace.